Righty. Well, Lacey, I think for the sake of time and keeping on track with our timing here, we're going to get started. I will really briefly introduce myself and the topics that we're going to go over today, and then I will intro it and hand it off to Lacey. So for everybody on the call, my name is Trey. I am one of the solutions consultants on the Toolio team. I have been with the organization for about 18 months. I have a background in planning and retail, and I will be moderating the call today. So I will be fielding any questions that come up as we go through this. We'll go through a couple of topics related to housekeeping and goal setting, and then I will hand this off to Lacey to really dive into the context of our webinar. So just for some housekeeping topics before we get started, any questions that you may have, there's a Q&A section that you can start to put your questions into. These questions are going to be seen only by myself. So if you don't mind including the company that you are representing as you are asking your questions, that would be great. And then we can utilize those to either reach out to any connections needed for like a CSM or an AE as we're moving through this, as we do have a mix of customers on this call. We'll be going through some quick context and demonstrations. And then as you're flowing in your Q&As, we'll provide some time to stop if it makes sense and it's something that's needed for the whole group. Otherwise, we'll have some time at the end of the presentation to go through some of our questions at large. Today, our goals are to go through and share some real examples of what our current customers and what other retailers are doing within scenario planning and how you plan for changes and adjustments to that you may want to make, especially as you see sales come in or you look toward planning out for future quarters. We're going to provide some best practices, and I will hand it off to Lacey to jump into a little introduction, and then we can dive into the content of our webinar.
Awesome. Thanks, Trey. So most of you I might have already met, but I'm Lacey, the head of solutions here at Toolio. I also started at TJX, spent about 10 years there in planning and merchandising. So 5 years in planning, 5 years in buying. I've been with Toolio about 2.5 years now, helping retailers like yourself on the sales side get to familiarize themselves with the platform, and on the customer success side, taking your current processes and translating them into the tool. And I'll be taking you through the scenario playing demonstration today. So before we start, a few things I want to go over. So for today, we'll be going through how to create impactful scenarios with forecasting, how to merge scenarios, comparing scenarios, and reporting on different scenarios. I do want to just familiarize everything with a few things in the tool. So on the left, you'll see the view. So the view is what you're working in, how that data is organized. So we're going to be going through a few different views today. And again, that is tied to the metrics and variance and how the data is organized. Where the scenario, which is on the right side, is what scenario are you working in? And the scenario is the planned data within that view. So planned data of scenario, in the view, how is this data organized? Awesome. So let me pause sharing for a second while I set myself up.
Thanks, Lacey. As you go in to share your screen, I will go off camera so that there's no distractions. And like I said, continue to throw your questions into the little Q&A box down at the bottom of your screens, and we'll take some time to pause along the way if there's anything that comes up. And I will be answering any questions that I can directly in that Q&A. And again, I'm the only one that will see the questions that come through. So things that are related to the topic at large, we'll talk about live. And if there's anything specific, we can go into that detail within that Q&A.
Awesome. Thanks. So to start, we're going to go through creating impactful scenarios with forecasting, and emerging scenarios we'll talk about throughout this. So we're starting today to review the view of in-season planning retail. This is a Toolio out-of-the-box view. This comes preloaded to all of our customers when they join. It's made with best-in-class planning practices that we've created here at Toolio with tens of 20s of years of experience within planning. And we're currently in our master scenario. Our master scenario is just that at Toolio, the main scenario that we're working in. So looking at this master scenario, we're currently forecasted for the year to do $163 million. This scenario is actualized. So what that means with this checkbox being checked off is that year-to-date actuals through today, so halfway of August, are actualized. And then the back half of August, September, and beyond is your remaining plan on this scenario. So that's indicated here where it says act/plan. I could easily turn this actualize off, and then this would give me just the plan information of that master scenario. So no actuals feeding in now. I'm going to turn it back on for what we're walking through today, though. So starting in this master scenario, a best practice that we like to follow is when you're making plan changes to do that in a playground environment. So I'm going to be doing that in our forecast scenario. So my first step to reforecasting is to merge my master into my forecast. What this is going to do is just copy this plan over into a different environment for me to work in. So I'm going to forecast scenario. So we're taking the source of our master into the target of our forecast for the entire year. No filters are on. So this is going to copy the entire plan over into that forecast scenario. We're going to dive into merging a few times throughout this and pause for questions if we have any as well. I'm now going to change over to that forecast scenario. So I'm going to go to change, find that forecasting scenario, and then this is my playground that I'm now going to work in. If you took note, the plan still is the same, 170 million for the year. We're going to turn that actualize on too, because we want to see how we've been trending here. And now we're going to make some adjustments. So with that actualize on, we've actually are at 163 million for the year. So year to date, we've done a little less than we've planned. Digging into our plan information itself. So again, as we mentioned, that's the back half of August and beyond is where our plan is living. The front half of the year is our actuals. Let's look at this department by department. Quickly, let me remove. All right, so starting with our clothing department here, you can see for the past few months, the trend in clothing has been really strong. We started the year a little soft, but it's really picked up. My goal for clothing for the year is going to sell $100 million. This is just planner's gut instinct, looking at where we've been trending, how we're planned. I just want to plan this up a little bit. So I'm going to plug in $100 million. Again, these are different ways of forecasting here within the tool. This is instinctual forecasting. We're going to go into our forecasting function as well. Next, looking at footwear, the volume has been pretty good for the rest of the year, for the beginning part of the year, but not nearly as strong as clothing has been. So I'm going to downtrend this and just say for the rest of the year, we're going to do up 5%. That's basically where we've been trending. And I'm going to copy this across. So I plugged in at the total number to forecast clothing, plugged in my comp or my variance to last year to forecast footwear. And then lastly, I'm going to look at accessories. Looking at accessories, this sales curve for the rest of the year is pretty inconsistent. We take some big drops in November, pick back up in January. But looking at our comp year to date over the last few months, it's a little bit more consistent than that. So I actually just want to match that sales curve of last year. So to forecast out accessories, I'm just going to copy my build of last year from August and beyond and paste it in. So now you can see we have a little bit more consistent of a curve here. Those are a few ways that I can forecast my sales using things like adjusting my top line volume, my build, or my comp. But within Toolio, we also have forecasting methodologies. So that would remove the part where you have to go in and instinctually know or plan these things, because we're going to allow the system to do that forecasting for you. So I'm going to take you through that quickly. So I'm going to expose this line here. So let's take note that based off of all those things we just reforecasted at the department level, we're currently planned to do about 170 million, 169 million within this. I'm going to run that forecasting function. So when you forecast in the tool, we're forecasting your seasonality curve and your volume. So right now, I'm saying I want to match the seasonality curve of my departmental sales history. So whatever my peaks and valleys were last year by department, let's match that for this year. We saw when we were looking at that trend year to date, it's been pretty consistent. And I want to do that using the volume of the last 8 weeks here. So this is going to take the volume of the last 8 weeks and then spread it out over the seasonality curve. A few other things to note. We're going to use a rolling average of 1 week. That means any weekly spikes or drops in volume will stay the same. We won't average them together. If we used 2 or 4 weeks, this would average those together over time. We're going into holiday season. Thanksgiving and Christmas didn't shift this year, so we want to just keep that at that 1 week rolling average. So what this is going to do is allow the system to forecast out my seasonality curve and volume based off of my trend in my sales history, opposed to before, where it was me just instinctually overriding those sales plans. You can see here, we now have a much cleaner forecast. That footwear comp of up 4.76% is throughout the year, as well as accessories and clothing following the volume trend of where they've been. We still got to a total sales plan of 165 million for the year, but the system built that for us with a click of a button, opposed to us having to go in and adjust each individual department. So now I have a forecast that I feel really good about. So I am going to merge this forecast back into my master scenario. So I'm going to do that again by going to merge. Now I choose master. So on the inverse of what we did initially, we're source of the forecast scenario merging into the master for the entire year with no filters on. And we're going to change back. So again, just to take note, in that forecasting scenario, we're now playing at 165 million. That actualizes on. We're going to change back to our master scenario. Make sure that actualizes back on. And there's our 165 million. So I'm going to pause there just to see if there's any initial questions on merging and the forecasting functions. I know you're here to talk about scenario playing, but forecasting different scenarios, and they go hand in hand. So Trey, any questions coming in?
Lacey, not yet. Q&A
Okay.
is pretty quiet, but again, if anybody has questions, feel free to throw them in that Q&A box and we will answer them when there's time or at the end.
Awesome. All right, great. So we're now going to go into a little bit more niche of a scenario that might actually happen. So to take you through, we just heard from production that they got approval from factories to increase their sweater quantities in Q4 by 30,000 units. Due to soft business at the beginning of the year, the team was pretty conservative when placing these sweater buys. But with this increased production, we feel like there's going to be $4.5 million of additional opportunity in Q4. So now I want to plan in those 300,000 units that we're going to increase in receipts, as well as the $4.5 million that we're going to increase in sales. So I know based off of what we just did that my master scenario already matches my forecast scenario, but I actually want to save this down as a one-off situation. This is something that we want to offline outside of our forecast. So I'm going to save this as a new scenario, and I'm going to call it 2023 sweater stretch plan. So this is again copying that master scenario into a completely new scenario. Because I had just saved this down, it still matches the overall plan of that 165 million for the year. But I want to focus just in on my knits plan for Q4 based off of that additional receipts we're going to get coming in and additional sales opportunity. So I'm going to filter to the Department of Clothing. And the time frame of holiday 2023, so our Q4. So this now manipulated the view that I was in to just be clothing, and I'm going to add in some classes too. So we manipulated to the view to just be looking at our department of clothing, and we're going to break those out by class. And focused just on the holiday 2024. So again, the view we're in the scenario we're working in is now our 2023 sweater stretch plan. So right now, sweaters or knits for Q4 is planned to do 8.6 million. And we want to add in 4.5 million of opportunity in sales, as well as 300,000 units in receipts. So when you're scenario playing or making plans for different scenarios, because you plan all your metrics within Toolio, like your inventory, your sales, your receipts, your margin, you're not just going to reforecast your sales. Sometimes you want to make receipt plans as well. So going down to our receipt plans here, right now we're planning on receiving in 44 million units of knits in Q4, but that needs to up to 74 million units based off of those additional 30,000 units coming in. So I'm going to adjust my receipt plan. So let's say 20,000 of those are going to hit in November. So that brings us to 4,874. And the remaining 10 are going to come in December. So 31,506. So now 74,000 units of knits are planning on coming in. We just adjusted our knits, but that again recalculated our total dollar receipts that are now coming in based off our average tickets and average costs that we have planned in here and rolled up to our total. So I'm going to save my adjustment in my receipt plan. And now I'm going to layer in my sales opportunity. So $4.5 million in additional opportunity in sales for Q4. So I'm just going to plug that right on top. So that would give me, quick mental math, a new sales plan of about $13.1 million just in knits. That spread that additional, 13.1 million. That spread that additional opportunity across all the months, keeping their contributions to the total. So the bulk of those sales would go into December because that's where most of the sales were planned. I'm now going to save this down. So if I've adjusted my receipt plan, I've adjusted my sales plan based off of those production increases we have coming in. And I now want to merge just this plan back to my master scenario. So I'm going to go to merge to master, and it's going to default to those filters that I have on. So it's only going to override my plan for clothing, which is what we're filtered to here, for weeks 40 through 52, which is Q4 here. So you have the capabilities to not only merge total plans, but also subsets of plans too. So this is a great feature if you have planners who are working on smaller subsets of departments or classes. They can work in their filter to their own areas of responsibility and merge them back to those master plans. So I'm going to merge that in. So now you can see that $13.1 million in knit sales in Q4. I'm going to change back to my master scenario. Again, the view didn't change because we still had those filters on, but the scenario we are in did, and there's that 13.1 million. If we remove any of these filters to just look at our total year for 2023, we can scroll all the way over to clothing knits for Q4, and we still have that total of 13.1 that we just adjusted. So that's covering off how to merge and adjust receipt and sales plans at subsets of your merchandise hierarchy. Again, I just want to take a quick pause to see if there's any questions, clarity points there.
Nothing yet, Lacey.
I must be doing a phenomenal job explaining this so clearly for everyone. So that's great to hear. Awesome. So now that I have a new master scenario that is going to plan to do, based off of what we've done so far year to date, 169 million. So if you remember, it was almost 170. It was about 165 before. We layered on that 4.5 million of opportunity in just knit. So now we're at about 170 million for the year. This is my new working plan, rolling plan. I want to compare this back to my budget that we had set at the beginning of the year. So there's a few ways to do this. I could just go in here and go show other scenario. So we're not changing the scenario we're in, we're showing another scenario. And we're going to show our 2023 budget. This is going to pull in our 2023 budget and compare it back to our act/plan, because that's what's actualized, of our master scenario for every single metric invariant within this view. So a ton of data that we are now looking at where we can compare anything. Our receipts, our open to buy, our weeks of supply. This is obviously a lot to look at, but let's just look at this quickly at a high level. Based off of our plan of 2023, we were going to do 166 million, but based off of this new working plan or forecast that we just created in our master scenario, we're going to outpace that to 169 million. From an inventory standpoint, we can compare the two throughout the year. So we're going to end January with actually a little bit more inventory than we planned, but that's okay because we're going to do a little bit more in sales. So that's just how we pulled in a comparable scenario into our current view. But I did want to show you that you could actually build views to compare scenarios that are a little bit easier to look at. So I'm going to jump over to this view that I already have built, and I'm going to refresh it quickly because we did make some updates here. So this is a view built that is our in-season planning master versus our 2023 budget. In this, neither of these scenarios are actualized. So these are truly just our master plan, just our 2023 budget plan. And you can see here that we even have a line for actuals pulling in. 0 values for the remainder of the year because we haven't actualized quite yet. So looking at this, you can see this is a little bit cleaner of a view. This is everything we're looking at, but we're comparing key metrics of inventory, sales, margin, receipts, and weeks of supply between our master plan, our budget, and how we're trending year to date. So let's look at this within sales. Our plan of our master for the year is that 194 million. Let's keep in mind, this isn't actualized. So that's why it's a little bit different than those numbers we were just looking at. Our plan of our budget for the year was 178 million. So our current master plan is trending about 8% higher than our budget. That biggest pickup is coming in November, December, and January. And if I had to guess, that's probably coming from clothing. Yep. So you can see clothing is picking up over plan there. Moving down to our actuals, year to date, we've done 84 million. And comparing our actuals to our master plan, we were dropping to that plan at the beginning of the year and then began to pick up to it. So we probably did some readjustments there. We can compare these metrics again. That was at sales, margin as well. How is our margin shaking out? Our receipts and our weeks of supply. So this is a view that we've built specifically to compare scenarios. You manage what you want to look at again in each view by choosing the metrics and the attributes within your menu. So going into gross sales retail, we chose to look at our plan of our master scenario or default scenario here, the plan of our budget, the variance of those two, our actuals, and our variance of our actuals versus our original plan or our master plan. So building a view that is defaulted to comparing scenarios is a really way to just pick and choose what are the key metrics that you want to look at when you're comparing scenarios. This is also great to pass off to management because we know that an initial view where we were showing our master versus our budget was an overwhelming view with tons of metrics and variance. So again, I'm going to pause there to see if there's any questions around building comparable scenario views. Trey, just checking in.
Nope, you're good.
Okay, great. So The last part that I want to review today is reporting on different scenarios. So again, I'm going to jump over to another view, top line product sales report. We're currently looking at our master scenario. So just to refamiliarize anyone, any report in Toolio, once you set it up by choosing your metrics that you want to look at. So we're going to look at all these metrics, the time frame, so last week, and the attributes. We're looking at this at the department class level. These reports will automatically actualize weekly for you once you save them as. You could look at this for any relative time period, so last week, month to date, year to date. I could even go back and pull a report for a custom point in time. And as soon as I set up a report once, I can even schedule these to be delivered out as well. So a lot of reporting capabilities come out of Toolio. We're a planning and reporting tool. I want to reiterate that you can get a lot of great reports out of here. So back to what we're looking at. We're looking at our master plan or scenario, and we're looking at our plan information compared to our actual information and compared to last year. So we can pull all three of these metrics in one place, actuals, plan, and historics. So last week, we performed at a total level as a company, 5% over our plan and 39% over last year. At an average ticket level, we were slightly below plan, definitely below last year. Our margin is pretty close to plan, actually a little bit better, which you like to see. And our weeks to supply, we're turning a little bit faster than planned. So that's great. This is our master plan. So again, that plan that we're updating consistently throughout the year, our forecast, if you will. I want to compare last week's performance to our initial budget that we had set at the beginning of the year. So this is how you can scenario play within reports. I would just go here, change my scenario to that 2023 budget. So now you can see, compared to our initial budget, we were only up 3% over plan. So our budget was a little bit more aggressive. Our average ticket's almost over $2 higher than our budget. So where before these were about the same, you can see we're now planning more. We're still outpacing our margin, which is great, and turning a little bit faster. So you can compare multiple actuals to multiple plans within the tool. Again, this is great to see how you're comparing to a stretch plan, a conservative plan, your initial budget, your current forecast. These all can be different scenarios within the tool. Any questions on the reporting capabilities?
No questions that relate to reports, but I think, Lacey, one question that did come up is around back to kind of forecasting, reforecasting, and having a stretch plan. I know you touched on this, but again, going through at that point when you do want to adopt maybe your forecast or your stretch to become your plan, what's the best practice around that?
So the best practice, I'm just going to reload this view back in, would be to merge that in. So from the scenario that you've worked in, which for us was that forecasting scenario, this was our playground, if you will, we made our adjustments in this scenario or that other knit scenario. From here, you would use that merge function. So this would merge it back into your master scenario, or we potentially could merge into our 2023 budget, but you can see here it's grayed out. That's because that scenario is locked. So just a side note, I'll get back to the question. You can lock scenarios, meaning you can't adjust them. Only the owner can adjust them. Obviously, once you set a budget at the beginning of the year, you don't want that to change. You've agreed on it with finance, with the rest of the company. That's why we can't right now merge into our budget, because it is a locked scenario. So what I would recommend to do that is, first, you could compare those two scenarios side by side. So I'm going to compare my forecast to my master, which right now it actually won't match. I'm going to show my forecast. So now you can compare the two scenarios side by side, and then you want to merge. But I did want to note that when you merge, you have to choose the scenario you want to merge from, which is right now the forecasting scenario. You have to be in that scenario and then merge into the master scenario. So the scenario you're in is always going to be the source of what you're merging into. And again, if you only want to merge for a subset of your merge hierarchy, then I would filter to that, whether it's a channel, maybe I just want to merge my store plans. Once I have that filter on and go to merge, it's filtered. Any other questions?
Yeah, thanks, Lacey. One question that kind of came up through this process, there's a lot of different scenarios that we've talked about. In this case, what's the difference between your 2023 budget scenario and the master scenario?
So my 2023 budget is, let me go into it, is the scenario that we built at the beginning of the year. This is the budget that's agreed upon for the company. So we planned on doing, sorry, I have the filter on. It's like, why does that look so low? We planned on doing this year, if I actualize this off, $166 million. So this is the budget that we set throughout the year. We reviewed this at our investment review. So bringing in 197 million in receipts, 166 million in sales. But you can see this budget's locked. So say I wanted to go in and adjust the budget to 20 million. It wouldn't let me save this because it's a locked scenario. So budgets are going to be like that initial plan. What are you all agreeing on at the beginning of the year? Because you always want to compare back to something. And then the master in this instance is my working plan. So it probably started in line with my budget, but as I've reforecasted and reworked it throughout the year, it is now my working plan or my rolling plan. And that's why it's different than my budget, because we've reforecasted it. The master is going to be your single version of the truth that everyone can reference. So that's where if you have individual teams and they're all working in their own scenarios, they can merge it back in.
Great, thank you. If anybody else has any other questions, feel free to throw those into the Q&A box and we can answer those.
All right. So unless, are any questions coming in, Trey?
No, Lacey, I think you were clear and concise in your explanation today.
Great. All right. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed the scenario today. If you're a prospective customer, please continue working with your BDR or your AE that you've been in contact with, or reach out to us. And if you're a current customer and want to go through a workflow more in depth specifically to you, again, reach out to your CSM or your implementation specialist to set up time with Trey and I, who are now on the training team, and we'll work with you to get these processes up and running for your team. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.